everyone. Last week we did some stretches that I would recommend after running, and this week we're going to do some strengthening exercises for the legs that I would do between runs on days where I'm not running, or potentially as a warm-up early on, well before I run. And we're really going to focus on the hip flexors today. There will be some other muscles involved, of course, around the core and the hamstrings and glutes. But our real main goal today is to stretch and strengthen these hip flexors. I think they're a big culprit to a lot of people's problems. When we sit all day, this is a flex tip position. If I lift my leg on up, it's being actively flexed. This muscle's pulled tight. Even while sitting, even though the muscle's not on, we sit here in basically this position. Imagine both legs on up. And this muscle just gets used to being in this position in this length. So when I go to let it on down my leg, this muscle doesn't want to let go. And actually the big muscle, the psoas, attaches to the femur and up to the spine. People think it hits the hip bone, but the big one hits the spine, and it pulls your back closer to your femur. In this case, when your femur's up, it's the femur is pulled towards the back, towards the spine. But when you get set down here and this muscle doesn't want to let go, it keeps pulling your back towards your femur. So it's obviously exaggerated, but if it were ever so tight, you literally couldn't stand on up. So, in an exaggerated position, I might look like this, and then I might arch my back and pull my head on back to make it look like I'm standing more upright, even though it's my back is being pulled towards my femur. So, this is obviously exaggerated, but in everyday life, you'll just see it by having excessive curve in your lower back and your butt kind of sticking on out, and you'll be walking around like this, and it'll hurt right back here because you have a lot of compression on the spine as it gets kinked as far back because this muscle's pulling on forward. So we are going to work on strengthening those hip flexors and lengthening them so they get used a little bit rather than just passively sat there, and more importantly, they get to stretch a little bit and allow that back to come into a more neutral position. So at first, I really want you to just kind of get this position drilled into your head because it's going to be really crucial throughout some of these next exercises. So if I'm sitting here, you got to think about my belt line. If I were to arch my back, you can see how the belt line kind of gets tilted forward. This would represent that hip being, the spine being pulled towards the hip. This just got pulled a little closer. What we want to do is open that on up by having a posterior pelvic tilt. We kind of want to use the glutes to pull down and the abs to pull on up. We want our belt line to be nice and parallel to the floor. So again, here's arched. And then here's rocked into that posterior tilt. The muscles that just did that are my glutes. They pull down on the back side of my hips. These muscles here are pulling down, and my abs are pulling on the front, which both create this tilted position. So make sure you got that under wraps. And we're going to jump right on into one of these first exercises. We're going to take it on down to a knee. And I'm going to go ahead and hold this on up because it doesn't matter with my first foot. I'd rather be comfortable on my knee than have to worry about my footing. So here we are. And immediately, a lot of times people get in this position and then they arch their back. Okay? They think that they're getting a stretch here. But what we really want to do is, again, flex the abs and the glutes. And I bet as soon as you do that, you go from here relaxed to flexed and posterior pelvic tilt. That means the posterior is tilted on back. You have a flex, a stretch immediately happening in the hip flexor. So we're going to start right with that, and we are going to work on reaching back to get a stretch on it. So this is a little bit of a stretch. Now we want to work on strengthening this muscle. So it's going to be a little funny because I should have started on the other side because I'm going to reach the wrong way. But on my left leg in front of me, my right leg behind me, I'm going to reach with my left hand to the leg, the side that my leg is forward on, and I'm going to reach on down without arching my back. That's a big thing, okay? Keep this abdominal area and glute area flexed, and then work on slightly tilting. So you reach down as far as you can, and then you bring yourself back on up. far as you can. And you can touch your heel. Awesome. And then bring yourself back up to right. If you can't touch your heel, then put something behind you, a box, a pillow, the couch, the coffee table, and just reach for that. Make sure you're kind of twisting a little bit, that'll get that stretch even more. Twist, reach on down, keep your balance, and then flex and pull yourself on back up. Again, every time you come on up, you should automatically be in this position. You shouldn't have been in this position where you're just stretching out your abs. If you feel it stretching here, you're going to be arching your back. You should feel it tightening here. And so that's hard to discern. So we'll do a couple on this left side. Reach. As far as I can get them. And we pull ourselves back up. And we will do it on the right side as well. This side's a little easier. It doesn't get as much of a stretch, but it does allow you to maybe work a little bit differently. And so it doesn't get as much, stretch is lessened because you're turning into the hip, but you still get the same strengthening. So we'll be on in here, we'll reach, and then we'll pull ourselves on back up. And the movement may be very small. I mean, this is very, very challenging. Just a simple body weight exercise is very challenging. That quadricep will start to be shaken and clinging on real tight. And it should be to help keep you balanced. Whew, all right, I'm gonna switch. That's no joke. Here we go. I'm gonna start with the harder side before I get too tired. I have my right leg in front of me, so I'm gonna turn to the right. First, I wanna make sure I'm in a good position here. Here's that relaxed and my butt kind of hanging back. I wanna roll everything on forward. I'm gonna reach on back with my hand, reach down to the floor as best I can, and then pull myself on back up. And I'm gonna do this 3-5 times. And I will go to the other side. Ooh, 4. That's good. And we're going to start off with this next exercise. And it's going to look very similar to the last one as far as setting on up in this lunge position. And a lot of my previous exercises and a lot of our previous yoga sessions, we've been doing lunges, and I've been emphasizing kind of leaning forward and driving up through that front leg in order to come on back. An excellent, viable way. But now we're going to switch it on up. So we've been spending several months doing that. And I know you feel it in the hip, in the quadriceps when you do that exercise, but it tends to work on hip flexion again. We end up leaning forward, which is this hip flex position, and driving up through out of it. What we're going to do this time, take a moment to get ourselves set on up. And you can make this more yoga-like by bringing the hands on up and doing all that. But for now, while we're just learning this one, we're just going to keep all the things to a minimum. Big breath on in, and next time we'll step back with the right leg. We'll get them both, doesn't really matter. And what we're going to do is we're going to focus on this back leg being what drives us. We're not going to drive back the 2 feet. We're going to stay in this lunge position the whole time. But we'll be down here, and we want to make sure that we are tilted forward as we can, so we're not arching back, right? We got that posterior pelvic tilt, abs on, pulling ourselves on up. And we get that stretch immediately going across this leg. And this time, we're going to lower ourselves on down, not leaning back, not leaning forward, stay nice and vertical. Lower down as far as you can, while that flexibility allows. And I want you to focus on this leg here. I want you to drive it on up. Kind of think you're pushing on back as if you're about to stride into the next running position. It's not on this leg anymore, it's on this one. This leg's gonna help some. You won't be able to push everything with this, but the main focus is on this back leg. And again, we lower on down, controlling that descent with these muscles, allowing them to be turned off carefully. And we keep working on pulling with those abs, building a bigger stretch as we go down. If you can go down to the ground, great. If not, it's fine too. It does not matter where you start. When you go back up, you focus on driving up with this back leg. Keep those abs engaged. You should be feeling it right across the top of this hip. I'll do a couple more. You can hold this position like we would in a regular lunge. You should always kind of have the stretch happening here. But in this one, we feel like we have the weight as well. So it might fatigue you a little faster than having the weight on that front leg in a better stable position. This leg being drawn back and stretched is inherently kind of a weaker position when it's being stretched out as far as it can. But we want that. We want to stretch it on out. And we also want to build some strength in that position as well. So it won't be, you know, if you could do a lunge with 150 pounds on you, driving through the front leg, you're probably not going to do that same way driving through the back leg. But, you know, maybe with some time. The idea is to work on the stretch more than anything. So let's go on the other side. Here we are again. We're going to step back with the left leg. Get ourselves nice and upright. That's a big thing here. It doesn't happen by arching our back. It happens by drawing in with those abs. I got that stretch happening right across the top of that left thigh. And I lower on down. Really, really focusing on pulling with those abs. Just where I need to be. Once I'm there, I drive through this leg. Working again. This is definitely a big stretch in those hip flexors. And then we squeeze them in order to drive ourselves back upright. Focus on keeping my abs engaged. Keep the body nice and upright. One more on the side before I drive on up. Bring myself up to standing. All right, so should be feeling well warmed up by now. Just with those few exercises, my legs are already kind of tight and shaking. Like I said, these are great things to do on days that you're not running. Because by tomorrow, you'll be a-okay. But I tell you, I'm gonna, these will be a little jello-like for the next 45 minutes to an hour, and then if I'll probably feel back to normal. But if I were to run even later this evening, I would probably feel it, my quadriceps and hip flexors, especially if I were going to do a longer run or push myself. A light casual run, which is all relative to every individual, might be okay, but I wouldn't make it the same day as like when you're planned hard runs. I would do it even the day after. Even if you're a little tired from running yesterday or the previous day, you can do this exercises, at the moment, just a little modified, not as deep, not as far of a rotation, and get a lot out of it. All right, so we did the lunge with the back leg. We did the twist, stretch, and draw on up. I've got one more to show you. This one is even crazier. There is a good way to modify it, but it requires a resistance band. And since not everyone has access to them, I'm just going to show you this way to do it, and you're going to just have to do your best on it, and you'll get better over time. Okay? So again, I notice I folded my mat on up, and I'm sitting on upright so that I'm comfortable. And we're always trying to keep this position, abs on, glutes on, our posterior pelvic tilt. Again, here's what we're trying to avoid, and here's the position we're trying to engage in. Okay, once we got that, again, you might immediately, especially if you've already been using your hip flexors, you're going to feel it in these legs right here, feeling it. What we're going to go now is very carefully put something behind you or hold on to something in front of you. That's really how you modify it. You hook something, a resistance band in front of you, maybe a towel, but something that stretches is definitely going to be better. but a towel will be there for safety. But we're here, we're engaged, feet are flat behind us, and you carefully lean yourself back. Not much, okay? Just go a little bit, just enough to feel it in those muscles, and then you squeeze yourself on back upright. Okay? This is going to engage all of the legs. You're going to feel it in the glutes and hamstrings as well. But our main focus is to stretch out these. So what you got to do, go on back, really make sure that you don't just let your hips fall on back. You can do something like this. And I still feel it in my quadriceps, but there's no stretch here anymore. You can see that this angle has just been decreased. I want to increase it to 180 degrees, hips to the spine, and potentially, and not more, because while this looks like I'm getting more out of it, it's not what we're looking for. Abs on, glutes on, straight body through here. Lower on down. That's going to be the hardest thing, is to make sure you don't sag or do a back bend instead. So one more down. Let's get a couple of good ones so you can see. Here I am. Really, really engaging the abs, squeezing the glutes, bringing myself upright. We're doing a limbo kind of. You go down just as far as you feel comfortable. Bring yourself on back upright. You can use this as a static hold. You just go down and hang on out right here. As long as you get a stretch, that's a-okay. I'm always for longer, gentler stretches. I'd rather you go easy and have frequency and be able to come back tomorrow and do the same thing than fall over, pull a muscle, cramp on up, and absolutely hate it, or just be so sore that you can't do anything again tomorrow, even if you did enjoy it. You got to wait 3 days before you recovered, that's just too much. You should be able to do something almost every day. All right, let's get one more. I'm going to go for depth this time. All right, that's all I got there. So, those 3 exercises right there are going to start to work hard on those hip flexors. All right, don't take them too intense, because these hip flexors on most people are way underused and are just, they're screaming for attention and help, but not too much. Not too much at once. Build on into it. Your body will thank you in the long run. And next week, and maybe even later, I'll show you some stuff that takes a little bit of equipment. Usually I try to limit it just to resistance bands, so that you can at least go to the store and get them, and they're very easy to move and manage. You can bring them into the office. You keep them at home by simply putting them into a backpack or even a purse or a suitcase or luggage of some sort. So those are about the biggest things I try to use. Overall, hope you feel it in those hips. Start taking care of them, stretch them on out. You'll have a better walking stride, a running stride, and you might be surprised that you start to relieve some of the back pain you might have, because remember, tight hips make you have to walk with an over-arched back. And if we can allow that back to kind of come to a more neutral position and use the abs and the glutes and let the hip flexors relax, overall you'll be in better position. So try those out. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys later.